All right, today I'm going to be talking about Andrew Marvell's The Definition of Love. And in this section, we're going to be looking at two of the metaphysical poets of the 17th century and two of the cavalier poets of the 17th century in these works that we're going to be looking at. And we're going to get us started off here with Andrew Marvell. If you had me for 102 last year, we read another poem by Marvell to his coy mistress. So we're kind of already a little bit familiar with his way of writing. He was a metaphysical poet, which meant that they focused really on the intellectual side of poetry, and the spiritual, the scientific, the moral focus there. They wrote in figurative, lofty language, heightened language. And so let's take a look at the definition of love. My love is of a birth as rare. My love is of a birth as rare, and 'tis for object strange and high. It was begotten by despair upon impossibility. Magnanimous despair alone, it could show me so divine a thing, where feeble hope could ne'er have flown, but vainly flapped its tinsel wing. And yet I quickly might arrive where my extended soul is fixed, but fate does iron wedges drive, and always crowds itself betwixt. For fate with jealous eye does see two perfect loves, nor lets them close. Their union would her ruin be, and her tyrannic power depose. And therefore her decrees of steel us as the distant poles have placed, though love's whole world on us doth wheel, not by themselves to be embraced, unless the giddy heaven fall, and earth some new convulsion tear, and us to join, the world should all be cramped into a planisphere. As lines, so loves oblique may well themselves in every angle greet, but ours so truly parallel, though infinite, can never meet. Therefore, the love which us doth bind, but fate so enviously debars, is the conjunction of the mind and the opposition of the stars. What we're looking at here is a love that is perfect in every way. However, it cannot and will not exist because fate is not going to allow these two lovers to be together. He says in the very beginning there, my love is of a birth as rare. We're really kind of unsure of whether he's referring to a person, my love, this person is rare, or his love, like his love there. So it's only with the introduction of the pronoun it in the second line that we realize he has a love, but not a lover. And 'tis, it is, for object strange and high. Then there's this extra twist of the knife in the metaphor of childbearing, as it was begotten, childbearing, a child of despair upon impossibility. So this love is the product of a union between despair and impossibility. Notice how he capitalizes both, giving them human characteristics as a personification there. And this resulting child is this hopeless love that he has. He thinks that that love is rare because it was born of despair, and he knows that the one that he loves is never going to be his. Um, and hopeless love really kind of often strikes us so much more powerful than hopeful love, where we think something may come of our desire. This is hopeless, like it's not going to happen. And he blames fate for this. Like he could easily obtain this love, but fate realizes that he and his lover would be perfect for one another. It's gonna keep intervening and preventing them from ever being together. Um, and so he uses several metaphors here, um, and some wordplay, where throughout he likens the course of love to geometric lines. We see where he argues that um, oblique lines, so these are lines in geometry that are slant, but they're not parallel. Oblique lines often meet, just as imperfect lovers often find their match. But lines that are parallel, they will never meet. They never converge. They never have a point where they're going to cross. And so that is true of perfect true lovers, despite their love being eternal, right? It's perfect. Parallel lines are infinite. They're never going to meet or converge and become an item because that's the nature of the way that it goes. Their love is going to remain unfulfilled. He also uses the idea of the world as a metaphor for relation to his lover. In the fifth stanza, there we see him talking about the two poles of the earth. He says, and therefore her decrees of steel, us as the distant poles have placed, though love's whole world on us doth wheel, not by themselves to be embraced, unless the giddy heaven fall and earth some new convulsion tear, and us to join, the world should all be cramped into a planisphere. So these him and his lover, they're like the two poles of the earth, the north and the south. Their whole world is between them, and them they're never destined to meet. The poles will never meet. The world is always going to kind of get in the way and prevent them from meeting. They're polar opposites, if you will. Um, Fate is keeping them separate, because otherwise they would be together. They're a perfect match in temperament and in a desire, and this is kind of like a metaphysical idea of the world. These two lovers being opposite poles, and he says the only way this will ever happen is through this impossible and purely hypothetical notion that the world is going to one day fold in on itself, where the two poles will meet and be reshaped into a planisphere, which is a two-dimensional shape. I know this is really like very intellectual and very deep, but that's the whole concept of metaphysical poetry in that highly intellectualized form. And then, if that were ever happen, if heaven were to fall and the earth was torn apart, then these two poles, he and his lover, may meet, but it's very unlikely that that is ever going to happen, right? There's not much hope. It's like that, the chances of winning the lottery, right? And so he concludes there at the end. He says, therefore, the love which us doth bind, but fate so enviously debars, and is the conjunction of the mind and the opposition of the stars. He concludes by saying, their love is based on the conjunction of the mind, the meeting of the mind. They're well suited, well made for each other. Sadly, though, the fate, because it is envious, or she or he, or however we want to personify that, because it is envious, it will always keep them apart, just like the stars, the opposition of the stars, the fates, right? Their temperaments they're well suited for each other, but fate is always going to keep them apart.